When it rains, it pours, seemingly at West Ham. Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the West Ham Network. Listen, again, it's just day after day, news after news, negativity after negativity, and it feels like it's not stopping. And typically of West Ham, when things are going good, they go good. When things are going bad, they are rotten to the core, and that's how this currently feels, because the good friend of David Sullivan, Jacob Steinberg, has come out in The Guardian and written a really concerning piece of news today, and that is that he has said that West Ham are under pressure to convince Tim Steidten to stay as technical director. Why is it more concerning? It's concerning because it's coming from his mouth, genuinely, which makes me think it's maybe come from David Sullivan's mouth. You know, not everything is true that you read in the papers, but when it comes to this circumstances, you can't help but feel a little bit negative with regards to the source of this particular story. And if this story is true, then it really could be a bit of a disaster for West Ham. Now, the other interesting thing is that West Ham have just brought in Tim Steiden's brother to the club, but listen, what do contracts mean? They don't really necessarily mean anything these days. Now, it's said in the article that West Ham are refusing to make any rush decisions on David Moyes' future, but they're under pressure to convince Tim Steidten not to leave his technical director role at the end of the season. And the mood at the London Stadium is uncertain after 8-match winless run that has hit Moyes' hopes of earning a new deal and caused internal frustration over the club's recruitment structure. West Ham brought in Tim Steidten last summer, and the Germans soon earned praise for the signings, of course, of Kudus, Alvarez, and some of the other players as well, spending the money that West Ham got from the Declan Rice deal. However, there is growing concern that Steidten, who has previously been at Bayer Leverkusen, is not happy in East London and could walk away in the summer. Sources believe he is frustrated with the way that West Ham operate and feels that he has not been given enough power. Now, that alone in itself should be absolutely massively concerning for us West Ham fans, to be honest, because bringing someone in of his reputable reputation and potentially, you know, that is sources saying that he is frustrated at what is happening at West Ham. Now, this is not him being frustrated at David Moyes. This is him being frustrated at the power that he's being given, the power which is delegated to him by his bosses, the people at the top. But that could change, apparently. This is the other interesting thing, and this is where it all gets a bit shaky and freaky, but it says that could change if West Ham decides to part company with Moyes, whose contract expires at the end of the season, and Steidten is expected to be in favour of appointing a new manager. So it's expected that Steiden's thinking could change if he plays a leading role in the hunt of a new coach. Now, we've brought this to you many a time. One of the big reasons for bringing Tim Steidten in wasn't just about player recruitments, but it was the fact that he's got knowledge and a reputation of also bringing in coaches, which he did with Xabi Alonso at Bayer Leverkusen. And that's also a concern because obviously he's linked heavily with the job at Liverpool, and they also will be looking for a technical director come the time when Klopp leaves at the end of the season. Now, if he is giving the leading role, that could potentially sway him to build upon this project that West Ham have got. And that's the only thing and hope is that he sees West Ham as the real project, the one where, you know, you don't go in and get things handed to you. You've got to work hard to turn something around. And if you look at Bayer Leverkusen, you know, 18 months ago, 24 months ago, fighting relegation to now sit on top of the Bundesliga. So sometimes you find these people who are willing to look at projects. My concern again sits at the top of the club as well. But he has brought his brother in, Maurice Steidten, as head of the international scouting and recruitment, and hired Maximilian Hahn as the head of technical recruitment and analysis. Yet there was uneasiness, you know, between potentially the rumours we were hearing about Steidten and Moyes last summer as the tensions grew during the transfer windows that we've had with both of them in charge. Of course, Moyes pushed for Calvin Phillips over the likelihood of us buying Ghanaian winger Ibrahim Osman, which collapsed. And now, of course, Brighton have came in and stepped in and taken him over the line. But West Ham, you know, ended the transfer window failing to boost any of our transfer needs when we lost a couple of players, Pablo Fornals and Said Benrahma. And the lack of incomings has been held up as one of the reasons for West Ham, you could say, dropping into 9th place that we're in just now. You know, we haven't just dropped that. I mean, it's literally, you know, we've jumped off a bloody cliff. That's how it feels, if I'm being honest. Now, the hierarchy at West Ham have resisted calls to sack Moyes, despite delays over a new deal, which I find really an interesting topic of conversation. You know, they've not given him the typical backing from the board, but they have in a roundabout way several times again. And Moyes himself, you know, has spoken out clearly by saying that, you know what, you want another manager, but no one has won as many games as him, which is fine to think it, but not necessarily say it when your focus should be on turning things around currently and not focusing on the past. You don't want to hear that. I'm just hoping, and the one thing we do know is that as much as you hate the boards, they have some ability to be able to attract something. They can attract a quality person of some sort with a reputable reputation, but maybe not necessarily in a manager's role. We don't have a history under this ownership of doing it. And if we do bring someone in, we usually shit on them quite dramatically. Slaven Bilic, Pellegrini, David Moyes himself, of course. And Moyes is good for businesses. People get pissed off at that comment, but it's true. He is. He consolidates. He keeps the club in the league, and now we've had 3 seasons on the trot in European football. That generates more income, but we are on the cliff edge. We are on fighting fire because we could finish the season in the bottom half and not qualify for Europe next year, which I think would be devastating for us. But it would all depend on how the season could be turned round, and or at the end of the season, if we were to get a new direction. And that's what we need. If you watch Russ's show earlier on, no direction. It feels like we've got no direction off the field from top, middle, and bottom. And it doesn't feel like we've got direction on the field from captain, top, middle, and bottom. It really feels like we're kind of going blind at everything right now. But the concerning thing is that Tim Steidten, according to Jacob Steinberg, is a bit miffed off, really, at the situation. And there looks like there needs to be some changes made sooner rather than later if we're going to be able to convince him that he is in the right job. My concern, again, is whilst we have one man at the helm, this will always cause us problems moving forward. And no matter what manager you bring in, genuinely don't see the end game, the end result, the sustainability, or the progression at this club. I said it before, 3 steps forward, 3 consecutive years in Europe, and it could be 4 steps back if we don't qualify. That's how I feel. But concerning that Jacob Steinberg has written this article, considering he is close to David Sullivan, the West Ham owner. But we will wait and see what happens. Obviously, in due course, things change on a daily basis, so keep an eye on the channel for that. Take it easy, and of course, come on, you Irons.